This is Signal and Noise, bringing clarity to data, tech, and AI.
Possible 2026 Miami Day 2 with the one and only, often spoken about, David Nyurenberg. How are you, man?
What's up, bro?
I love to say your name because I think it's frequently fucked up. People mess this up all the time.
You might love it, but I don't love when people say my
Well, hey,
name.
you got a multi-syllabic name. My name's 2 syllables, Brett House, and it gets messed up all the time. It doesn't travel. People call me Bread.
Bread?
Bread, everywhere in the world.
Do they fuck up the house too?
The house, generally not.
Okay.
Generally, the house is
All right, so we're
maybe a house or house, but hey, great. You're the SVP of Digital at InterMedia
That's
Advertising, right?
Yeah.
You were on the pod before with Sarah Caputo, who were at dinner last night, and you've written a lot and talked a lot in the industry about not only sort of not ad fraud, but sort of media efficiency. And where advertisers can be more effective in leveraging their dollars.
I mean, within the efficiency in caboodle, you got ad fraud, you got different types of waste that go beyond just ad fraud.
Yeah,
you've got arbitrage. You've got bad revenue models. You've got vendors trying to pull one over on their clients. I mean, it's just it's a fun.
Yeah, and you've been pretty outspoken about what's wrong and what needs to be fixed, and you've exited organizations because of that outspokenness.
That's correct. And then somebody has to be, right? Because who wants to work in an industry where all the great efforts that we put in ultimately don't matter because a few entities are corrupting the ecosystem and getting away with bad practices and diluting the efficacy of advertising, which is ultimately bad.
Yeah, and it's all like a short-termism, right? It's all about kind of a profit drive to say we need to spend these dollars that were allocated to me, whether I'm an agency or otherwise, by the brand, regardless of the sort of the media buy output, right? Like if you're buying fraudulent inventory or just crap inventory that is going to underperform or not meet the needs of the client for that particular campaign, they're going to do it because they've got to spend the money. Is that the
I think
oversimplification?
I think it's a bit oversimplified. I think maybe that was more relevant several years ago than it is now to a degree, because I feel like we as an industry now care a bit more about media quality, and media buyers are getting more savvy and technical and really putting in more of the work to validate the inventory that they're buying. Not everybody, of course.
Yeah.
But there's more and more, and there's more and more people and companies that you could put in that sophisticated bucket, right? So I think, by and large, many agencies, especially independent agencies, want to do a good job. They want their clients. They operate on relatively transparent media models.
Yep.
So the incentives aligned with the client incentives. But naturally, on the holding company side of things are a bit more squirrely, and I'm always amazed at how holding companies are good at innovating new ways to fuck their clients.
Yeah, and let's dive into that. So, I mean, do you think that one of the causes of this is principle-based buying? I mean, do you think that drives, or do you think principle-based buying is a good economic decision to say we've got buying power as a let's say an agency holdco, we can buy at volume and then in a sense arbitrage off and sell this back to our clients. But when you're selling premium inventory for high CPM rates to your clients that cost you 50 cents CPM, that to me seems the part that gets a little disingenuous, right? Because you're selling cheap inventory and potentially misrepresenting what it really is, when in fact it's just sort of raw reach, but it may not be brand safe. It may not really drive any outcomes because you may not be actually hitting anybody that's.
Well, you're going to be driving outcomes. It's just like, how are you measuring those outcomes? What are those outcomes? Are you properly assessing via an independent measurement system those outcomes, or are you relying on your agency or brand or ad tech partner via their own home built measurement system to measure those outcomes, right? Grade their own homework. No, that's really what all goes into effect. But I'll tell you this anecdote I heard from a friend at a holding company. So they had a big brand, right? And the big brand wanted to decrease their budget significantly year over year, but maintain the level of work required to manage those budgets, right?
Yeah.
So the amount of people that were required to manage the smaller budget versus the big budget was still the same.
Yeah.
But now
yeah.
if you have a smaller budget, you're not going to be able to support
The same number of
the
FTEs.
same number
Yeah.
of FTEs, correct. So thus layoffs. But the agency brought a principle-based buying model to the brand, and the brand signed off on it, and they were able to retain all the employees.
Yeah. Yeah. And clearly that's changing with agentic, with sort of the,
Well, this is recently happened.
yeah.
This
No,
recently happened.
yeah. But you're also seeing on the agency side, I mean, their FTE model, there's sort of that revenue structure around
Right.
supporting these accounts with large, basically managed services. That's under threat right
It's
now.
under threat. It's not sustainable. In this case, the brand was happy to sign off on the principal media deal because it meant that there would have to be no layoffs and the level of quality of work would remain.
Yeah.
But, it was a sacrifice. They gave them transparency in return for quote unquote efficiency.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, do you think that that's just kind of a symptom of agencies sort of failing to adapt to what's happening around them?
Yeah, I think so.
And it's almost like a gap filling
I think so.
exercise. It's like, hey, maintain our margins, maintain our FTR revenue model as long as we can, because we're not ready to make that full change. At this
Right.
point,
And,
right?
it's kind of sad.
You get your quarterly results that you've
Right.
got to report. And if you start to see things dipping, it's going to have an impact on shareholder value, and it's going to have an pressure on the business.
Right. And, the winds of change have been fluttering for 10 years now. You can see that anyone who cared enough to look and do their homework could see that the legacy agency model was not sustainable long term, especially with brands just knocking commissions down more and more and more.
Yeah.
Something had to change, yet the change has been a move towards a principal media buying structure. Credit to the industry, we always find a way to move backwards rather than forward.
Yeah. And it adds opacity. Like it makes the whole process a bit more opaque because
Correct.
you don't really know the true value. And Rio and I and you we've all talked about this. It's like, you'll realize that the markups are at a rate that just is unacceptable, right?
Right. So like in the case of the anecdote I just told you, in this case, the brand got full transparency into what they were buying.
Yeah.
But they didn't get transparency into how much the agency paid up front for that.
Yeah.
Right? So they saw the final price. They got the publisher level transparency, but they didn't know what ultimately the true CPM of that media was.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that was a sacrifice they were willing to
Yeah. And we've talked about that case study where you do an audit, you realize they were charging 4 or 5x what they were actually paying for the media, right? Which I don't know how they were representing in this particular case study, how they were representing the media to the client,
right.
As other than just a reach play, right? Because was it being represented as premium audiences, premium inventory, premium publishers? Because in that case, your argument would fall apart because, or you could just mask it by saying, hey, these are, exponentially higher CPMs than what they actually paid for. I think that was the problem, right? Is you're buying cheap inventory and charging expensive, more premium rates when in fact it wasn't premium.
Well, we don't know.
I can't
answer that question.
Well, yeah. Well, in this case, this was a case study that from Maria that he ran, and they saw it. They saw it all in the spreadsheet. It was a spreadsheet that was accidentally sent to him by a client, and they saw the markup rates, and they saw how it was represented to the client, and they're like, "This is complete bullshit." They called out the agency for. Let's pivot from that to CTV, because that's an area that you got a ton of interest in and involvement in. The CTV ecosystem, from both a measurement perspective, from a fragmentation perspective, and even a quality of inventory perspective, there's challenges there. Tell me what you think are some of the biggest challenges right now with CTV it's clearly a growing space. There's a larger growing video media space. But what do you think are the biggest challenges with CTV?
I think the biggest challenge ultimately with CTV right now is the lack of appreciation, understanding, and patience that brands have for it as a channel.
Yeah.
The performance CTV narrative has convinced many of these brands, especially the SMBs and the DTCs and some of the smaller ones, that don't have massive budgets to spend, that CTV can perform like a Google or a Meta.
Yeah.
Right. And with a Google or a Meta, you expect results almost instant.
Yeah, exactly.
And you see all the numbers right there and they look good. CTV, you need one, you can't just run a small budget, right? You're not going to see great results or learn much with a small budget.
Yeah.
You need to spend and you need time in market and you need to gather learnings and then you need to optimize. And unfortunately, a lot of these brands don't understand that. They'll do a small CTV test, not see what they wanted to see, and then they'll turn off and be like, all right, I'm just going, I got a CTV is not for me.
Yeah.
Right.
And but is that is that misapplied expectations as to what type of results, what type of KPI CTV is meant to deliver? Because if you think of traditional CTV, technically should be served on the television glass.
Right.
It isn't always that way.
Right.
You've got a lot of cheap CTV inventory that sort of masks the CTV that's being served on other devices.
Well, this matter. You're watching Hulu on your iPads now or your phone.
Yeah.
But there's not a ton of that type of inventory.
Yeah.
I'll usually just go for CTV only, but like the old device buy, usually like it's 80% CTV, 20% mix of mobile, desktop, tablet.
Yeah.
If it's below 70% CTV, then something's usually off.
Yeah, something's usually off, and you're getting kind of fake out of
something the string.
Yeah. No, so back to that point about expectations around CTV, because if I think of CTV as sort of sound, sight, and motion, generally big screen, immersive environments, it reminds us of linear TV, right? And what is linear TV for? Brand building, brand awareness,
Correct.
the halo effect
Correct.
around brands, right? And then you have deeper funnel, mid-funnel tactics that are more direct response, right? It's like you see a Toyota ad and then you're at the dealership level, right? And suddenly you're seeing a dealership online, they're potentially retargeting you.
Yep.
That's a more down funnel, like come into the dealership, take a test drive. It's a different KPI. Yep. So is that's my question about misexpectations. Why would you be expecting CTV to perform like Google, which is more of a last click attribution type of model?
Right. Well, to me, CTV is a full funnel, right? Good advertising, especially advertising that tells a story like video on TV does.
Yeah.
Should drive awareness and knowledge of the brand, which long-term should convert into outcomes, into purchases.
Yeah.
The leads, correct? A few years ago, I built an algorithm pure because this whole idea of it's either brand or it's performance, it's awareness or it's direct response. It can't be both. It's one or the other. It drove me nuts because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Advertising should do both.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Who just wants to run ads just for quote unquote awareness and not drive sales? They want sales. They want to make money.
Yeah.
So I built an algorithm that ingested a combo of lucid brand lift data and conversion data from the DSP.
Uh-huh.
Both of these data sets went into the algorithm. And then the algorithm would identify the pockets of inventory that drove both high brand lift and direct response performance and start optimizing towards that.
Yeah.
And what we saw was within the first 3-4 weeks, you had a good, strong lift in brand lift and recall. And then within week 5 and 6, that's when the direct response performance really picked up. You had it a bit. The start was ramping up a bit. But then week 5 and 6 and 7, that's when it really kicked into gear.
Yeah.
And then the brand lift also stabilized, but at a very high level.
Yeah.
Right.
So the brand lift was having a halo effect on the direct response response rate.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
and those direct response actions might have happened in a different channel, not necessarily within the CTV channel, right?
Which happened.
You might do a search, you might do some other activity that gets you to some level of conversion at entering.
Right. I generally think that CTV is very much under-attributed by our legacy measurement systems. But in this case, my hypothesis is proven.
Yeah.
Advertising drives both awareness and direct response. You just got to measure it correctly. Right?
No, that's true. Yeah. And I think, we saw that a ton at Newstar when I was at Newstar. And I just interviewed Mike Finnerty, who ran our MMM and MTA practice. And one thing that we had Bank of America, JP Morgan, a lot of the big banks, right? And one thing we saw within those organizations is that 80% of their budget was spent on direct response advertising. So it was the direct mailers, right? Expensive on a per mail piece, but worth it because of the lifetime value of a customer that you converted to like a credit card, for example, right? And so because it was so measurable, household targeted, they fell in love with it, and they would put 70 to 80% of their budgets into just that down funnel channel, right? Direct mail, and they could continue. They could support their argument to upper management that this was working, and they would underestimate the value of upper funnel brand marketing. It could be CTV, it could be linear TV. And so we ran these sort of 10-year models, right? Because it was 10 years worth of data, because we had a long-term relationship with both clients, and found that that the upper funnel, when you had more of a 50-50 split in your media spend between upper funnel and lower funnel, you actually saw a significant increase in lower funnel activity. So it was the halo, whereas if you kept it the 80-20, meaning 20 in brand and 80 in direct response, right?
Tapped out.
And so the halo effect, which to your point is, we're consumers, we're exposed to things, we recall things, we might think like, hey, I'm looking for fill in the blank. And you're going to think about the things that you know, either that or people have recommended them to you, and then you go and you commit an action. But that's brand building, that's brand awareness. And I think your point here is that it's critical, and that CTV has got to be seen as I think it's got to be seen a little bit more like linear television, right? I mean, do you think that?
That's what I say. CTV is still TV. CTV is TV. Linear CTV, the user experience. If I'm watching an ad on the TV, it doesn't matter to me if it's linear or CTV. My brain can't tell.
Yeah,
it's an ad on a big screen.
Yeah, and like, what do you think about? Because one of the things that I've seen, and I was hoping that CTV would not follow the same path, where I thought the ad load challenge with linear television, where when they finally implemented this ads across all stations. So when you wanted to flip, like you're watching a game and you want to go to another station and you're hoping you can see another game, let's say it's like NBA and you're going to MLB, and you're getting commercials all aligned. So I remember when that happened, and I'm like, well, now I am forced to watch commercials, right? Without subscribing to kind of a streaming provider, right? So like, I always felt that the ad loads were too high for my linear television consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm feeling that CTV has just imitated, if not even compounded, that problem, right? And both from a frequency management perspective, I'm getting the same types of ads over and over and over again, right? And from a fact that I think I'm being exposed to more ads on CTV than I am like per hour of watching.
Well, I have some theories on that. Well, one, we love talking about how many people are watching streaming TV these days. The growth, the numbers. Rarely do you see a breakdown between ad tier subscribers and non-ad tier subscribers.
Yeah.
Right? So like when you're seeing those streaming numbers, you have to ask yourself, how many of those actually have ads?
Yeah.
And what I believe is not as many as we would like to think they are.
Yeah.
So ultimately,
the fast channels are not, you're saying they're not quite as well penetrated as the more authenticated subscriber-based ad-based experiences.
Well, I don't think the fast channels have as much viewership as they like to claim.
Yeah.
That's one thing, right? And then two, naturally with the Hulus and the Netflixes of the world, right? People are like, there's going to be a split between people who go in the ad tier and the not ad tier.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you combine the fact that I don't think there's as many people watching these fast channels as the fast channels claim there are.
Yeah.
And then you have a bifurcated paid versus ad tier with the premium CTV publishers. You're gonna need to over deliver on frequency and get more ads in front of people than they might like in order to make some money.
Yeah. Well, and do you think that's a good user experience? I mean, did CTV lived up to its hype, its promise, or do you think we've just fallen into the same over advertised loop? And I know we're in the advertising and tech industry, but there's a balancing act here, right?
The promise of CTV ultimately, I think, was you can select what you want to watch whenever you want to watch. You don't have to abide by a schedule.
Yeah,
right? It's all on demand. So I mean that really with the convenience, right?
Yeah, there's advantages to that.
Convenience,
right?
That was the promise.
Yeah.
What was the ad What was the ad promise for CTV? I mean, it was always going to go in this direction. We were always going to fuck it
up. Yeah.
So question. I mean,
yeah.
Well, we're going to do right by it. Come on.
Yeah. So you're saying that they're not delivering a better experience from an ad delivery perspective, because you're seeing more repetition of ads, right? You're not seeing frequency capping enforced in a way that you see in linear television. So it's a shittier ad experience.
I mean, there's less transparency, so you can't really optimize. That's correct.
So let's pivot there. So less transparency in measuring outcomes for CTV. Where is that breaking down for advertisers?
Well, the way we like to measure CTV right now, and for many people, is still in the legacy way we measure display online video via web pixel placed on the website.
Yeah.
And what I like to say is CTV is a much different dynamic than online video and display. Yes, it's digital, but I think because we just put the digital name on it, we then apply our legacy thinking and strategies that were applicable to online video and display to CTV, but it's a completely different beast. So, for instance, with a web pixel, with online video and display, right? The impression usually was served on the same device where the conversion occurred.
Yeah.
Right. With some nuance, when the year of mobile kicked in, right? People started converting on mobile, right?
Yeah.
Using their mobile phones more. And the device graphs started coming into play and getting more adoption.
Yeah.
But the device graph was an addition to the measurement, not the primary piece of primary foundation of measurement. With
Yeah.
CTV, where the impression happens on one device and the conversion will happen on a different device, the device graph is the focal point, is the foundation, is the most important piece to measure CTV correctly. Because you can't measure a conversion happening on a computer when the impression was served on the TV without a device graph.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's linking those devices not only to the household but potentially to the individual if you can do that with any level of accuracy. Right. Generally, it's at the household level, right? Yeah.
So, naturally, device graphs, and there's been recent research from TruthSet come out that's shown how inaccurate
We got Scott McKinley on a little bit later.
Oh, good.
This week. Yeah.
Tell Scott.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed.
He was an Olympic cyclist.
Was he now?
Yeah. He was the lead of the Olympic cycling team in it was 1986 or 1992. Yeah. So he is an uber athlete.
Oh, wow.
Just if you didn't know. So the next time you talk, I'll be like, I heard you were a cyclist. He's like, yeah, I was an Olympian. It's pretty impressive.
I feel relatively unaccomplished.
Yeah.
So we put out research recently that shows just how inaccurate the signals that make the linkages between different identifiers within a device graph are.
Yep.
So device graphs are a lot less accurate than we like to think they are.
Yep.
So now you take that into consideration. And now again, we go back to the pixel. Pixel is placed on the webpage. For a conversion to be counted, the pixel has to fire.
Yeah.
Now, if you're running an ad blocker, which 30 to 40% of the US, based on the research I've seen, does.
Yeah.
Pixel won't fire because it blocks all pixel fires. If you're running a VPN, Pixel won't fire.
Yeah. So that takes out your work population in a lot of cases.
Correct.
Percentage of your work.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. If you're converting on Safari or an iOS phone, iOS strips out, Safari strips out first-party cookies after a 7-day window, and then it blocks third-party cookies by default.
Yeah.
So highly likely your conversions, if you're converting on Safari or a mobile or an iPhone, will also not be counted.
Yeah.
By a pixel, not to be captured. That's a shit ton of fucking people.
Yeah.
So you have all these different factors, and then again, if you're on another browser like Safari, like Brave, like Firefox, they block
Firefox
pixels as well.
People still use Firefox. I gave that up years ago.
So the research I saw was 28% of the US uses Safari, 4% use Firefox, 2% use Brave.
2% use Brave, and the rest are Chrome.
And the rest are.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wow. But 50% of the US has an iPhone.
Yeah.
So that's all to say you have all these factors convalescing to make measuring CTV out with the pixel not capturing all conversions. And we saw this at InterMedia, where we were running a campaign for a DTC client, and we picked up, let's just say, 100 conversions from the pixel, 100 sales. Not great at all. But then,
and where were these sales happening? Was this an online e-commerce type of experience? Yeah.
So, and then we decided to match up the IPs from impression exposures to the IPs logged in their CRM, because their CRM matches the IP address of all converters.
Yeah.
Right? While people had to buy something. We match those IP addresses.
Yeah.
It's not 1% accurate by any means type of manual attribution. But what we saw was that instead of 100 matched IPs / pixel firing conversions, there were 1,000.
A 10x difference.
10x difference. Significant. And there's the difference between the abject failure of a campaign and a very successful.
Yeah.
So then, I was like, wow, this is worse than I thought. Right. And I dug in to see, try to understand how can it be this bad? Because, I've seen numbers, I've heard numbers that about what the discrepancy could be, but not this bad. And then when I looked into their data deeper, I saw that 60% of all their purchasers were coming from Icon. 60% of everyone buying their product, and they're moving millions a week. In most cases.
Yeah. Yeah. So that applies to just any sort of attribution. It's not just CTV, right? It's any sort of digital interaction.
It applies to a device graph, heavily device graph reliant share. So
yeah.
if we're talking about also audio, applies to audio.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just to finish that up, the solution ultimately here, and there's no perfect solution. We've rolled out a patchwork of solutions. Is you use the browser limitation. You do that matching if you can get the data from both sides. If you can get the log files from your DSP and the IP addresses from the CRM. And then last but not least, run an MMM. So like this client was also running Crescent, which is a MMM partner, like a Triple Whale or House.
Yep.
And CTV crushed it in MMM, and this is almost a near real-time MMM. Right? Like part of this thing that tipped me off was like, we were looking great in the MMM, great ROAS, but the pixels were barely capturing anything. Yeah. So that's what got me to start doing.
Yeah, like oxymoron. And I talked to an MMM, the U.S. president of MuteNext, which is an Australian company that came here, and they report back on, because remember, you're bringing in, it's anonymized data.
Yep.
Generally, yep. Right? It covers a whole bunch. It's marketing mix modeling, so it's covering every seasonality factors, econometrics, any sort of economic impacts that could affect basically impact or outcomes for a particular media channel.
Right.
And they report their data out. It's all anonymized. They report their data out on a monthly basis because they're at the enterprise level. So they deal with enterprises, and they basically claim that they're using this big strategic budget allocation decisions. We're going to take this away from CTV, and the you could make that more frequent, but you're losing sort of fidelity and accuracy on really what's causing the impacts and where the shift should happen. So, I mean, that'll be my MMM question back to you: is real-time MMM? I'm going to call you out. Is that real, or are you making that up? There's
a 3-day lag.
Because I mean, there's test and learn, experimentation, right? Where you can test. You can have a control group. You can have geo blocks, right, where you have off and on, and run small segments. But the question is that going to have the type of insight to impact an entire media plan, right? Be able to go and say, I need to shift $100 million from this channel to this channel, right? That's where I think MMM becomes much more of a predictive, data heavy product, right? Yeah. That's faster than it was, because it used to take 6 months to turn this stuff around. Yeah. 12 months. Now you're getting into these life cycles that are much quicker. It's largely agentic driven versus people driven. But just I thought that was interesting, because you said real time MMM, and I thought
these DTC brands, they live and die by their MMMs. Yeah, they make all their decisions ultimately based on what they're doing themselves.
And what do you think the frequency of their media shifts are in terms of budget allocation?
It depends. But I mean,
is it like a quarterly, monthly?
No.
Weekly? Yeah. And this is digital channels, obviously, because of commitment, you can't make the changes as quickly. But they'll make incremental changes per channel to see how they, and these are direct to consumer.
Yes.
So a lot of it's down funnel, direct marketing.
Also,
and you're seeing a much shorter sales cycle.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. That's why, for lack of a better word, these near real-time MMMs, they work better for these DTCs because, it's much more responsive. The sales are coming in much faster. The time to purchase is much faster oftentimes. So,
So what's your thought? And I'll ask you my final question, because I'm on the measurement kick, and we don't cover it enough. And you certainly love to get wonky. Is MTA dead? Do you think multi-touch attribution has a future? Or do you think some of these modern next gen MMM solutions, the Rocker Boxes, the MuteNext, who we just interviewed, and a few of these others, are sort of replacing the need for sort of MTA as we once knew?
Consider this question is not very clean, but it is. I think MTA is very much needed. I think it definitely serves a purpose and has a place. But just the nature of the fragmentation in the industry, how one entity might be willing to share data necessary for an MTA while another will not. Yeah. It makes it impossible at this point. Not impossible, but hard. And long term, it'll only get harder as more and more entities become more and more privacy conscious and lock in their data. So MTAs, as we know, they have a shelf life, and will likely be phased out at some point, just because they'll be
the nature of our walled garden universe, right? Well, hey, thanks, David. This was awesome. Good dinner last night. Great having you. I hope you're enjoying Miami.
Thanks for coming.
I know. You're not yeah, we're following up possible with 4 days of Jazz Fest. So keep
Right after possible.
keeping the drinking to a minimum while
You know,
possible.
you didn't tell me it's right after this.
Yeah. You're not following the same rules of engagement.
My liver will not let me.
Yeah, right. Well, thanks for joining us, man. It was a pleasure as always. And thanks everybody.